This is a Fox News alert breaking late tonight. Democrats go public, vowing to take all steps necessary to seize President Trump's tax returns in a wide-ranging multi-committee investigation. Plus, an exclusive report from the editor of a website that says it's seen the glowing book proposal the president's former attorney, Michael Cohen, pitched last year. What was in it? Well, it's reported to be in direct contradiction to Cohen's testimony this week on Capitol Hill. We've got the scoop. And the president tonight says he was misinterpreted regarding his comments on what Kim Jong-un knew about an American student who died in North Korean captivity. His family speaking out. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. Democrats no longer hiding their plans tonight, announcing publicly that no matter what the Mueller investigation concludes, they're preparing to take all necessary steps to get President Trump's tax returns from the IRS. Correspondent David Spunt tracking the story for us tonight. Good evening, David.
Hey, Shannon, good evening. House Democrats are not fooling around here. They want President Trump's tax returns. They want them as soon as possible. Tonight, we're learning they will sue to get those returns if necessary. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel reporting that the official request for years of the president's tax returns will go to the IRS in the next few weeks. We're also learning tonight that the Ways and Means Committee Chairman Richard Neal from Massachusetts has reached out to several House committees that are in charge of investigations. In a statement to Fox News this evening, a spokeswoman for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi wrote, quote, "Every day the American people in Congress learn more about President Trump's improprieties, from conflicts of interest to influence peddling, potential tax evasion, and violations of the Constitution, all roads leading back to President Trump's finances," end quote. The president's tax returns took center stage many times during the 2016 campaign, but when Trump got into office, the buzz around the returns went away. Well, now it's back. A big reason, former Trump attorney Michael Cohen, you see him right there, his testimony on camera to Congress this week, where he alleged that Trump deflated the value of properties to lower his tax bill. Cohen also claims the president called the IRS stupid for giving him a $10 million tax refund one year. And it doesn't end with just taxes. Axios is reporting the Democrats on the Hill plan to call Trump associates and family members to testify on other business dealings, and they may issue subpoenas if necessary. Some of those who may be called before Congress: Alan Weisselberg, Trump Organization CFO and longtime friend of the president, Felix Sater, a Russian who Michael Cohen claims he worked with on the Trump Tower Moscow project, Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter, and her husband, Jared Kushner, and her brother, Donald Trump Jr., regarding the Trump Tower Moscow project. I want to point out we reached out to the White House tonight for comment, but the president did tweet earlier today. He argued that members of Congress should not go after his business dealings and should not listen to Michael Cohen. And speaking of Cohen, Virginia Congressman Jerry Conley told the Washington Post that Cohen, quote, set a very rich table. He says, we're now looking at a 10-course meal. Much more to come, Shannon.
Yeah, they say the investigations are only beginning. David, thank you.
Sure.
All right, joining us now, tonight's Power Panel, Democratic strategist Kevin Chavis, Ricochet.com's editor-in-chief John Gabriel, and Kelsey Bolar from the Heritage Foundation. Welcome to all of you tonight. Good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, so a little bit more from the spokesperson for Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying this: the improprieties, the lack of transparency around them, they give the House legitimate legislative oversight and legal reasons to review the president's tax returns. We will take all necessary steps, including litigation, if necessary, to obtain them. Kevin, that sounds like they're ready to rumble.
They are, and frankly, this is something that should have been done as soon as Trump was sworn in. Honestly, there was reason to begin to question some of his financial dealings, some of his contacts with Russia, and some other improprieties. I think that Nancy Pelosi's spokesperson laid it out perfectly. I think the Democrats are doing what they're supposed to do. I mean, the Congress members took an oath to the American people, not just to the president. And frankly, when the GOP had control of the House, they just didn't look into this stuff. They sat on their hands. And I think that Cohen's testimony, regardless of whether or not he is 100% credible, certainly raises a lot of questions that need to be looked into. And I think all of us should expect for the Congress Oversight Committee and the Judiciary Committee, all of the intelligence committees need to look into this because it's very serious.
Okay, so all the committees, apparently, there are several of them that are coordinating this request that will go in for tax returns. Now, under law, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee can put in a request to the IRS, but then it looks like Secretary Mnuchin is going to be the one who makes the final determination on these tax returns being released. In the meantime, Charlie Kirk tweeting this: I believe we should have an investigation into every multimillionaire in Congress who has accumulated that wealth on a congressional salary using our tax dollars. John?
Yeah, it's really interesting to see. I feel like I'm reading headlines from 2016. I think it would have been great if during the Republican primaries, Donald Trump had released his tax returns, but he didn't. The Republican voters didn't really care. Then the American people elected him president. So I'm not sure what Democrats think they're doing. Maybe they just wanted to go on a fishing expedition and hopefully find something that embarrasses him further. I think they're wasting their time. What they might want to do politically is focus on 2020 rather than trying to relitigate the 2016 election.
Yeah, but Kelsey, much of this will run into 2020. I can't imagine these investigations being wrapped up in the next few months.
It will, and the political risk for Democrats is that they keep making these grand promises about Trump-Russia collusion and now tax fraud, and yet, you know, we're 2 years into the administration and they've come up with nothing. And so I think this is yet another fishing expedition, another witch hunt, and I think, you know, most Americans would like to see Democrats focusing on legislating, not investigating.
Okay, let's turn to another thing that's getting a lot of headlines, which is this is the talk about within the Democratic Party. There are a number of folks over in the House a little miffed. There's a bit of a split because, as Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, has said, behind closed doors, reportedly, we're either a team or we're not, and we have to make that decision, saying people aren't sticking together. The freshman Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying there's a list, and she is keeping watch, and there will possibly be primaries. John, what do you make of that?
Well, it's really interesting. The only reason the Democrats have the House right now is because they ran very moderate candidates with a very moderate message in red states and purple-leaning districts. We know that happened coast to coast. AOC now wants them to go on a far left progressive agenda. And if that happens, I think Nancy Pelosi is going to lose her gavel the next time the election comes around. Different districts need different representation, and AOC doesn't realize that. It's kind of shocking that she doesn't.
Well, the Washington Post had a really interesting story right up that alley, and the headline is Nancy Pelosi hasn't learned her lesson from 2010. And they talked about how in 2009 they had these great majorities and they were getting all kinds of things done, but then there was this very purist, you got to vote with us on cap and trade and all these other kinds of things. Well, they say this time around 29 House Democrats hold districts that Trump won. Others hold seats that had long been Republican but swung to Hillary Clinton in 2016. Members in these seats recognize their voters are different and don't want all of the progressive agenda forced down their throats. Kevin?
Well, I hear that narrative being pushed that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other members of the Democrats are pushing things that the Americans don't want. But that's not true. Most Americans support things like universal background checks for gun purchases. Most Americans, even now, slightly over half, say they support some form of Medicare for all.
But not once they find out. When you look at the polling numbers, when they find out taxes will go up or there will be a delay in getting tests or treatment, those kinds of things, it falls apart. When people are really told about what it would mean in reality, most Americans don't support abolishing ICE and other kinds of things that are on this list. I mean, in these particular districts, there's real worry, these swing districts, that Democrats that are trying to hold on to those seats are going to have a hard time convincing people who could go either way and that really are not far left or far right.
And that is true. And I think that, you know, Representative Ocasio-Cortez was really trying to light a fire under some members of her caucus. I mean, she's been in Congress a month and she's already been able to assume such a strong leadership position. And truthfully, a lot of the things that she's pushing, there is an appetite for.
Well, but Kelsey, I know that there are some in leadership who are worried about how far she's pushing to the left, and they're worried about her challenge to them as well. I mean, it's a dual threat. I want to read a little something from a piece on AmericanThinker.com. They say Ocasio-Cortez's vow to be the bad cop against her fellow Democrats who are too moderate for her comes off as old socialist practices made new again, like Stalin's henchmen. She'll primary them out of office. After that, the real socialism begins. Kelsey?
There's so much hypocrisy going on with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez here, because when she wants to buck party leadership to put forth her Green New Deal, she's allowed to do that. She considers a hero for doing that, and many members of the press also consider her a hero. And yet, when moderate Democrats want want to vote for a measure as logical as requiring illegal immigrants who attempt to purchase a firearm to be reported to ICE. She has a problem with the 26 Democrats who voted in favor of that. Yeah. Really, this whole situation just shows how far left the Democrat Party has turned really on her behalf.
Well, and they want to keep everybody on the same message within the party, as both sides often try to do. All right, Power Panel, thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
You too, thanks.
All right, following his congressional testimony tour this week, Michael Cohen is facing a criminal referral to the Justice Department for purportedly lying under oath. Republicans Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows allege Cohen made numerous false statements, including about his desire to work in the Trump administration. But Cohen's personal attorney is pushing back on that assertion. In a statement tonight, Lanny Davis says, quote, early on, Michael Cohen speculated about a possible position in the White House, but after he consulted with his family and friends, he decided that he preferred to stay at home in New York City and be personal attorney to the president. So the president is tackling the Cohen story, as he often does, on Twitter. The president tweeting that Michael Cohen was pitching a book that would have heaped praise on the president before the FBI raided his office last April. The president saying that proposal proves Cohen committed perjury in his congressional testimony this week. So what do we know about this alleged book proposal? Let's go straight to the source, David Martosco of the Daily Mail. And David, I understand, as you've been overseeing the reporting on this, I mean, your folks have had a look at the book proposal. So what can you tell us about what it said?
It was universally and incredibly positive about President Trump. Remember, this was a few weeks before the FBI, burst down his doors and seized his computers and everything. But at that point in time, he was prepared to write a book and present it to the public that was just glowing. It was a gush fest about President Trump. And editors who met with him told us that he had nothing but positive things to say.
Yeah, a quote from the Daily Mail article says this: everything he wanted to say about Trump was positive. That's from one executive who discussed this deal with Cohen. Even in our meeting, he was glowing with praise for the president. Now, we're told that he apparently was shopping around a proposal out to a number of potential publishers, right, that one of them was offering him $750,000. The deal apparently fell apart. You all right, reported when he got into legal trouble.
Correct. Yeah, this was Hachette offered him a $750,000 advance for the book project. Of course, the book never happened. But what's most interesting about this, of course, is fast forward to this past Wednesday, Michael Cohen has had a completely different view of the president since the time when the special counsel has said, hey, we want you to cooperate. Remember, the things he was charged with could very well have landed him in prison for 10, 20 years, if they had a really aggressive prosecutor. So I think the president's point somehow that he is lying to lower his jail sentence, it might hold some water. But more importantly for the president right now, I think he's got some good ammunition now. It's not why we wrote the story, but it's giving him some ammunition to say that Michael Cohen was either prepared to write a completely fraudulent memoir last year, or he lied from beginning to end on Wednesday.
Well, and some of the things that you all quote from this proposal, and it doesn't sound like it got to the level of a manuscript, because that's what the president's been tweeting about, that Congress needs to get its hands on the manuscript. It doesn't sound like it got that far.
No, but I think Congress, if they wanted to, could certainly subpoena the proposal from maybe the publisher, from Cohen. Look, I think the special counsel probably already has it. I'm sure it was in his emails on his computer that the special counsel has. But Congress, I don't think, has it. And I think Democrats on the House Oversight Committee, if they wanted to, could vote a subpoena tomorrow. I don't think they will, because I think that what they would find would indicate that Cohen perjured himself tremendously on Wednesday. But the Republicans on the committee could force a vote to subpoena that book proposal.
Even though they'd likely lose it.
Well, but they would, of course, politically.
Would be public.
Yeah, but politically, they would force the Democrats to go on record as either supporting the subpoena or saying we really don't want to see it.
Yeah, because it sounds like from the book, the excerpts the proposal that was put together, he talked about how no one really understands Trump like I do. It's a different world, but it works for him. And part of the thing is he doesn't want people to understand him because it's part of the way that he negotiates and moves through the world.
Well, I think there's something to that. I mean, I've interviewed the president a number of times in his Trump Tower office, on his airplane. He does want to keep people off balance. A lot of his negotiating style is to make people wonder, what the heck is this crazy guy going to do next? That is certainly some of his strategy. But I think what's most interesting to me about the book proposal itself is that Cohen laid out a bunch of things that people say about the president. He's crazy. He's a liar. He's, this and that. He's in over his head. And he said none of that's true at all. So here you have Cohen in his book proposal saying the president is not a liar, saying it flat out. Fast forward to Wednesday, and he's saying the president's a huge liar.
Yeah, a con man, a cheat, a racist, all the things that are the exact opposite of what was apparently in this proposal.
Correct.
But very interesting reporting. David, thank you for coming in to give us some inside scoop. Okay, the parents of a college student who died after being imprisoned in North Korea blame Kim Jong-un. and they're challenging President Trump for believing the dictator's denials, that he didn't know about what was happening to the young American at the time. Trace is on the case with the very latest developments. And coming up, a report from CPAC where conservative commentator Michelle Malkin shocked a lot of folks there by calling out Republicans, including the late Senator John McCain, all because she says they've been way too soft on illegal immigration.
Yes, I'm looking at you, Bush family, and yes, I'm looking at you, the ghost of John McCain.
Publicly saying he believes Kim Jong-un when Kim says he didn't know about what was happening to a young American, Otto Warmbier, who died after months of captivity in North Korea. Trace is on the case from our LA newsroom. Trace.
Good evening, Shannon. We pulled up some past transcripts from North Korea's state-run television, which is run by the Kim regime, and they clearly indicate that Kim Jong-un knew every detail about Otto Warmbier's imprisonment. And during the 2018 State of the Union address, President Trump invited the Warmbier family and blamed the North Korean regime for his torture and ultimate death. Then, after this week's summit in Vietnam, the president said this about Kim. Watch.
I don't believe that he would have allowed that to happen. It just wasn't to his advantage to allow that to happen. Those prisons are rough. They're rough places, and bad things happened. But I really don't believe that he was I don't believe he knew about it.
That set off a flood of negative reaction, most importantly from the Warmbier family, who wrote, quote, "We have been respectful during this summit process. Now we must speak out. Kim and his evil regime are responsible for the death of our son Otto. Kim and his evil regime are responsible for unimaginable cruelty and inhumanity. No excuses or lavish praise can change that." Some GOP lawmakers also called out the president, including Senator Rob Portman from Warmbier's home state of Ohio, who said, quote, "We must remember Otto, and we should never let North Korea off the hook for what they did to him." Today, the White House tried to walk back the president's comments, and the president himself tweeted, quote, "I never like being misinterpreted, but especially when it comes to Otto Warmbier and his great family. Remember, I got Otto out along with 3 others. The previous administration did nothing, and he was taken on their watch. Of course, I hold North Korea responsible." Meantime, there's word the U.S. military will announce the annual joint military exercises with South Korea every spring will no longer be held. The reason is apparently because the cost of the war games keeps going up while the threat level from North Korea is going down. Officials say canceling the drills has nothing to do with this week's summit. Shannon.
Trace Gallagher, thank you very much. All right, let's bring in Asia analyst Gordon Chang and former Special Operations Intel analyst Brett Velikovich. Great to have both of you with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, Gordon, I want to start there with you on the U.S. no longer having these exercises, large military exercises with South Korea. What do you make of the explanation, and do you think it's a good idea?
I think we have to continue these large-scale exercises, Shannon. Look, at this very moment, the North Koreans are participating in their massive winter training cycle, and they are preparing for an invasion of South Korea. And by the way, these exercises end this month when the ground conditions for an invasion of South Korea are at their best for the North Koreans. So we have to continue large-scale exercises to maintain readiness, and when readiness erodes, as it has been now for the last year, because we haven't been doing the big exercises, nothing good ever happens.
All right. Well, Brett, they say, the administration says this was already planned. It has nothing to do in connection with the conversations that they just had during the summit in Vietnam. Now, what's getting a lot of attention there is obviously the president's decision to walk away without a deal. Now, going into it, most of the criticism was that he would agree to something and it would be terrible and it would be bad for the U.S. But when he walked away, he did get some bipartisan support from doing that with some caveats. Here's former Vice President and potential 2020 contender Joe Biden.
The president did the right thing. He did the right thing by walking away. Diplomacy matters. Preparation matters. The president treats everything like it's a real estate deal.
Okay, Brett, so some praise for the decision to walk away, but also criticism about the way the president is handling this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the problem is the president has to make up now for decades of failed foreign policy as it relates to North Korea, a policy that was more designed to score political points and to claim false victories than to actually do anything meaningful. And right now, the president has to navigate a very serious and dangerous relationship with Kim Jong-un. And in my opinion, as tragic as a situation that happened to Otto Warmbier, what's going on now is a lot larger than just one individual. I mean, thousands of U.S. military soldiers were killed by North Koreans. And so what I think about this, I think that there's got to be a larger strategy involved here that we are not privy to. When the president comes out and he makes these public comments, as distasteful as they may sound, I believe that they're designed in a way to further the negotiations more privately. And so we need to trust that the president knows what he's doing here in these negotiations.
What about that, Gordon? Because a lot of people have said, listen, regardless of the Otto Warmbier situation, which nearly everyone agrees, and the intel community seems to agree that Kim knew about this and that they would know about an American that was being held. It's not just here. I mean, the president often is very friendly with other leaders who are less than palatable, but it seems that that's part of his strategy, that he is very relational.
Yeah, and clearly, we've had generations of Americans, presidents who have tried to create these good working relationships with Soviet, Chinese, North Korean, Iranian leaders. And we got to remember that these regimes, friendship really does not matter. I mean, they're ruthlessly pragmatic. And although they may like a particular American president, it isn't going to help us in any material respect. So I think it's important that we remember these regimes are weak. They are very concerned about their human rights situations. They're very sensitive to criticism. This gives us a very important source of leverage, and we should be using this leverage, and we generally don't do it, and that's our fault.
All right. Well, Brett, the sanctions, those are the thing that the two sides seem to be stuck on, because the president said they wanted us to lift everything in exchange for something not good enough. The North Koreans said that's not true. We wanted some relief. But listen, when you have other players like China and Russia who aren't fully enforcing these sanctions, where do we go?
Well, I think the conversations absolutely have to be continued privately, and I think that's what's happening. I mean, he's setting the conditions for that. I mean, the problem is a lot of his critics were trying to claim that this was already a victory for the North Koreans before they even sat across the table from each other. And the irony in that is not lost, that we've had decades of failed foreign policy in this realm. And so it's a complicated situation, obviously. I mean, this is no doubt going to be the negotiation of President Trump's life. But the fact is, that's why we elected him, is for his skills at negotiation. And so he understands the weight, the burden of having thousands of U.S. troops that have been killed, individuals like Warmbier that have been tortured in North Korean custody, and he's moving forward with that in mind. But there's no doubt in my mind that if anything that President Trump wants to win at is that it is a negotiation, and he's going to do that to the best of his abilities.
Yeah, and I think Washington definitely doesn't understand him. He's not a politician. He's very unconventional. He's not a diplomat, and he's going to do things his way. All right, Brett and Gordon, thank you both very much. Great to see you. All right, high school track takes center stage this weekend in New England, sparking nationwide controversy because male athletes transitioning to female are setting records and leaving athletes born female in the dust. Some of those competitors now are going public with their complaints.
It's frustrating and in a way demoralizing when you're at the start line of a race and you know what the outcome of the race is before it even happens.
Fox Nation's Britt McHenry is here live to weigh in next. Tonight we explore the topic of transgender athletes in high school sports. It's a difficult balance between the rights of transgender individuals to compete and the rights of others to compete on an equal playing field. Here's correspondent Jackie Heinrich.
High school runners are going toe-to-toe this weekend at the New England Regional Championships in Boston. A chance to get in front of college coaches and maybe even earn a scholarship. But Connecticut junior Selena Soule won't be competing in the 55-meter dash. She was edged out of the top 6 spots in part by 2 transgender runners, Andrea Yearwood and Terry Miller, both male at birth, now identifying as female. Terry set a girls' state indoor record. Andrea came in second.
It's frustrating and in a way demoralizing when you're at the start line of a race and you know what the outcome of the race is before it even happens.
Medical physicist Joanna Harper, who's also a transgender runner, says high school athletes like Selena can face unfair competition from trans girls. It comes down to whether trans athletes have undergone hormone therapy.
Before these athletes get on hormones, then they have all of the athletic capabilities of men.
But high school athletics aren't governed by a single set of rules, making regional competitions a gray area. According to transathlete.com, Connecticut is one of 18 states that allow transgender athletes to compete without restrictions. 17 states review individuals case by case, and 9 states require surgery or hormone treatment. 6 states have no policy at all. Part of the challenge is age. College students and Olympians must undergo a year of hormone therapy to compete as trans athletes, but most teens don't begin hormone therapy until after puberty. Civil rights are also a concern. Hudson Taylor is the founder of Athlete Ally, a nonprofit LGBTQ athletic advocacy group.
Any pathway that separates or divides or segregates trans athletes into a different category is separate and is not equal and is not fair.
Advocates say rules for pro athletes are one thing, but a lot of high schoolers join teams to have fun, and transgender teens shouldn't be denied those same positive experiences. Shannon.
Jackie, thank you very much. Okay, so let's take a closer look at this tricky effort to balance inclusiveness and fairness with Fox Nation's Britt McHenry. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I want to play something from a couple of parents. Okay. One is the parent of a transgender, female to male now competing athlete. And the second you'll hear from is one whose daughter lost to a trans athlete. So the two parents on the two sides.
My daughter is a trans female. That means she needs to compete on girls' teams in order to feel most comfortable. She's running because she wants to be part of a team. And we all understand the benefits of being part of a team at this age. You know, camaraderie, perseverance, grit, teamwork.
Was set up many decades ago. I mean, even probably going back to the Olympics, you didn't see any females running against males.
So how in the world, especially in high school, where you saw the map there, where there different rules in nearly every state, how do they figure out how to handle this?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the Olympics, because that is a proposed policy right now to make it a year that athletes go through hormone replacement, as opposed to the original 2 years that they introduced in 2004 before Athens. Look, I feel for these student athletes, I really do, because I played competitive soccer all the way throughout college. It built my work ethic, it built my desire to be on this set right now, to have that camaraderie, as they mentioned. But physically there is a difference. And those girls, 2 girls, lost entrance to New England regionals, where there would have been more college coaches, more scouts, because of, in my opinion, an unfair advantage. You know, boys have larger lung capacities. You know, you can look up NIH, the National Institute of Health, the fast twitch muscle fibers that you can only maximize to a certain extent. You can't, some of this you're just born with, right? And the list goes on. Bone density, there are physical advantages that boys have, and that needs to be looked at scientifically before we get into the PC culture debate all the time, in my opinion.
Yeah, in South Dakota, they just had a bill they tried to pass there that would have said you compete by your birth gender.
Yes.
And that failed. There was a tie vote in the Senate there, so it didn't go anywhere. So that's not the rule now in South Dakota. But the ACLU director in South Dakota said of that bill, no one is harmed by allowing transgender people to compete consistent with who they are. But you brought up the idea of college scholarships and that kind of thing. Is that oversimplifying it? Is that a fair statement?
I don't think that statement is fair at all, because look, when you're at that level, and I just go back to trying to get any sort of notice from college coaches, you know, let's apply this now to soccer. What if you are benched and put on the sideline? You're losing significant time to showcase yourself off at tournaments. That's where all of these scouts go, because of speed or physical advantages given to transgender athletes. So you are being hurt. Your chances of succeeding are diminishing. And several fellow teammates of mine, both at Stetson University and in the state championship teams I was on, have reached out to me and said, please speak up about this, because this would not have been fair for us, and we don't want our young girls to grow up playing the sports we loved and not being able to fairly compete.
Yeah, and I think with all these, you know, states have the right to figure out their own framework, but there's such a patchwork now across the country. So we'll see as they continue to handle it in their individual legislatures where this goes. Britt, thanks for weighing in.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. All right, you have seen the brutal video of a conservative on campus taking a powerful punch to the face. Well, tonight we've got breaking news. There's been an arrest in the vicious attack on the UC Berkeley campus. Late breaking details next. Plus, we've got a report from CPAC where Vice President and Mrs. Pence, Devin Nunes, and Michelle Malkin took center stage. But Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was the talk of that convention.
Coaching means making tough choices.
Activists, you saw the punch there. Zachary Greenberg has been identified as one of two men who confronted a conservative activist who'd set up a table in a university plaza. The conservative activist was displaying signs that read, "Hate crime hoaxes hurt real victims," a reference to the Jussie Smollett case, and another saying this is MAGA country. UC police plan to present the case to the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, which will then consider whether or not to file criminal charges. Well, CPAC 2019 making waves in suburban Washington this weekend. Conservatives sounding off on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Green New Deal, and the left's growing affection for socialism at the annual Political Action Conference. Correspondent Leland Vitter taking it all in for us. Leland.
Vice President Mike Pence preached to the converted, calling socialism and by extension Democrats who support it the greatest threat to American democracy and prosperity.
America will never be a socialist country.
The vice president also used the friendly audience to defend his wife Karen taking a teaching job at a school requiring parents to sign a Christian values pledge.
Lately, it's actually become fashionable for media elites and Hollywood liberals to mock religious belief. Let me say before all of you, I couldn't be more proud of my wife.
Mr. Pence didn't mention self-proclaimed Democratic Socialist Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, although she emerged as the new favorite foil.
Especially from AOC, she's the gift that keeps on giving.
AOC, we can't take her for granted. We can't think that the American people understand what socialism is.
I don't want a Green New Deal. I want a Black New Deal. And the good news, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is that actually can be free. It doesn't cost $93 trillion.
Many Republicans privately worry about what a publicly released report by the special counsel could mean for President Trump's re-election bid. And the crowd got a preview of a new way to defend their leader.
But I want everything that Mueller did made public. Every single thing that Mueller used needs to be made public for all of America to see.
But the day laid bare a continuing division in the greater conservative movement, what it means to be a Republican.
Sanctuary cities have metastasized, and both parties are to blame. And yes, I'm looking at you, retired Paul Ryan. And yes, I'm looking at you, Mitch McConnell. And yes, I'm looking at you, Bush family. And yes, I'm looking at you, the ghost of John McCain.
President Trump maintains a complicated relationship with CPAC. During the 2016 primary, then candidate Trump famously skipped it. In 2017, he returned for a victory lap at the gathering, although many Republicans were skeptical of his young presidency. He returns tomorrow as the undisputed hero of the group. Shannon?
We will take folks there live. Leland, thank you very much. Well, the Washington Post makes an admission tonight about its coverage of the Covington Catholic controversy, but it might not stop a major lawsuit. That tops tonight's Real News Roundup. Facing a $250 million defamation lawsuit, the Post issuing an editor's note this evening, acknowledging that later information either contradicted or failed to confirm accounts relayed in its initial reporting about this incident and Nick Sandmann. But Sandmann's attorney, Lynn Wood, says the acknowledgement is, quote, too little, too late. The Los Angeles Times reporting tonight that the California Department of Justice paid more than $1 million to settle sexual harassment and retaliation claims made by employees during then Attorney General Kamala Harris's tenure. That includes a six-figure settlement to a then special agent who claims the agency harassed and retaliated against him. Harris, who is a 2020 Democratic presidential contender, has denied knowledge of the allegations. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren confronted on the campaign trail over her opposition to a bill that would provide protections to babies that survive botched abortions. Take a listen.
What about the babies that survive abortions? How come they can't have health care?
Infanticide is illegal everywhere in America.
You voted against it.
Go ahead. Infanticide is illegal everywhere in America.
And just weeks after she sparked a firestorm over a tweet many deemed anti-Semitic, Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar again being rebuked by fellow Democrats over new controversial comments. At an event earlier this week, Omar suggested pro-Israel lawmakers, quote, hold an allegiance to a foreign country. Tonight, Democrat Eliot Engel, who's the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, is calling her remarks a vile anti-Semitic slur and is calling on her again to apologize. Well, a guidance counselor is suing her Catholic school employer because the school put her on leave after learning she'd married a woman in direct violation of her contract, which requires her to follow the church's doctrine on everything, including marriage. So does she have a case? Our attorneys are here to argue. You're the jury. Night court is next.
Yourself now.
Time now for Night Court. We pass no judgment on these stories, but present them to you at home, the jury, for your consideration. On the docket tonight, a case involving a Catholic high school guidance counselor who signed a contract to follow Catholic doctrine, but she was then put on leave when the school found out she'd married a woman. That counselor, Shelley Fitzgerald, has filed a discrimination claim with the EEOC and says a federal lawsuit may be next. All right, making arguments tonight, attorney is specializing in cybersecurity and privacy, Lisa Garber, and founder, CEO, and senior partner at Genco Legal, Brian Rotella. We have assigned you your clients tonight. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you, Shannon.
Okay, so I want to put Exhibit A, and I won't read the whole thing, but basically what her attorney is arguing is that she met and exceeded all her job expectations. She did a great job. And despite that, they then revealed her sexual orientation. They put her on leave and they ostracized her. Brian, does she have a case?
Shannon, she does, and that's because 9 here loses to 1. Title 9 is what normally protects folks for sexual orientation, but here, because of the First Amendment right